Thank you, Zoe Leonard. Thank you. So that text is up, as we all know and hopefully have seen, a few blocks from us. And at that sign, as many of you have probably done or certainly noticed, people stop, they take pictures. No doubt they post those pictures to social media. From those postings, as is readily apparent from a quick Google search, people repost. They read the text themselves. They send it out to friends. They reimagine it. They rewrite it. They restage it. And they restage its meaning in relation to their own desires and urgencies. Zoe's text, in its incredible 24 years of life, has activated an incredible publicity. It has and continues to amplify in stunning and magical ways. I want to take just a moment before I move on to the rest of the program to read a short excerpt from a text that David Wojnarowicz wrote in 1989 in the catalog for an exhibition that happened at Artist Space, curated by Nan Golden. The text is called Postcards from America, X-Rays from Hell. And he addresses, I think, a lot of the sort of ideas of this ripple and reverberation of publicity. In his text, this text also was what caused Frohnmeyer to pull the funding from Artist Space, which the sort of contention was that he was offended by it around Wojnarowicz's comment about Cardinal O'Connor and some of the Republican senators. But in fact, I think it was literally to shut Wojnarowicz up. Wojnarowicz writes, "To make the private into something public is an action that has terrific repercussions in the pre-invented world. The government has the job of maintaining the day-to-day illusion of the one tribe nation. Each public disclosure of a private reality becomes something of a magnet that can attract others with a similar frame of reference. Thus, each public disclosure of a fragment of private reality serves as a dismantling tool against the illusion of one tribe nation. It lifts the curtains for a brief peek and reveals the probable existence of literally millions of tribes. The term general public disintegrates. What happens next is the possibility of an X-ray of civilization, an examination of its foundation. To turn our private grief for the loss of friends, family, lovers, and strangers into something public would serve as another powerful dismantling tool. It would dispel the notion that this virus, the AIDS virus, of course, has a sexual orientation or a moral code. It would nullify the belief that the government and medical community has done very much to ease the spread or advancement of this disease." He continues, after some beautiful paragraphs, which you should go home and read. He continues, I'm going to skip ahead. "Bottom line, emotionally, even a tiny charcoal scratching done as a gesture to mark a person's response to this epidemic means whole worlds to me if it is hung in public. Bottom line, each and every gesture carries a reverberation that is meaningful in its diversity. Bottom line, we have to find our own forms of gesture and communication. You can never depend on the mass media to reflect us or our needs or our states of mind. Bottom line, with enough gestures, we can deafen the satellites and lift the curtains surrounding the control room." The first speaker, writer, reader we have coming up is Fred Moten. Fred Moten. Fred Moten, who has had such an incredible impact on the proliferation and amplification of things we need to hear. Fred Moten is the author of In the Break, The Aesthetics of the Black Radical Tradition, Hewson's Tavern, B. Jenkins, The Feel Trio, The Little Edges, The Service Porch, and co-author with Stefano Harney of the Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study, and with Wu Sang, who we will also have the pleasure to hear from today, with Wu Sang of Who Touched Me. Please join me in welcoming Fred Moten.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Sharon and thank Zoe. I'm with Zoe. So. This is called We Want a Precedent, Precedent. Our president, our deluded and degraded and demonic sovereign, in whatever form this abstraction of our abstract and wholly fictional equivalents will have taken, is a featureless point on a long and hopelessly straight line of knockoffs. It's like how Richard of Bordeaux, who can do whatever he wants except stop himself from doing whatever he wants, carries around his own deposition, disguised as a serial murder that constitutes the peaceful transition of power and its vulgar ceremonies, like a genetic flaw, as the illegitimate but inevitably heritable bowling broke-ass ambitions that leave him with her ever-increasingly ideolated capacities for self-reflection. So that in all its singularly focused limitation and qualification, in the relative nothingness of the prison that it calls a world, the all-encompassing and all-to-be-settled sphere that it stomps all over all the time, posing for an impossible arc of deadly and impossible pictures, our president, whichever one you ever wanted or didn't want, each one after the other in noticeable imperial decline, is just a sick, uneasy head in a hollow crown, making us watch it talk about how it's gonna kill us, and then making us watch it kill us. What we want is usually said to be all bound up with what we don't have. Zoe is talking about what we want, though, slantedly. In the dimensionless infinity room we can't even crawl around in when we cruise the rub and whir of the city as a grove of aspen in late fall, in the mountains, held and unheld at the bottom of the sea. She's talking about what we want in relation to what we have, when what we have is all this experience of not having, of shared nothing, of sharing nothingness. She speaks of and from a common underprivilege, from the privilege of the common underground, in and from the wealth of a precarity that goes from hand to hand as a caress. Look at all the richness we have, she says, in having lost, in having suffered, in having been suffered, in suffering one another as if we were one another's little children, as if we were in love with one another, as if we loved one another so much that all one and another can do is disappear. We want a president, she says, who's loved and lost all that with us, who's shared our little all, our little nothing. Such a thing, such general and generative, more and less than political nothingness would be unprecedented. Maybe she doesn't want a president, maybe she wants a precedent, the endlessly new thing of the general and absolute nothingness, its zen or xenogenerosity, its rich and strange generativity, which keeps on beginning in beginning's absence as ungoverned and ungovernable care. Is it possible to want what you have become in suffering, in the absence of suffrage, without wanting what it is to suffer? How can you want what it is to be all without wanting not to be whole? Is it possible to crave the general incompleteness without that seemingly unbearable desire to be pierced, ruptured, broken? In lieu of the president we want and don't want, we have Cedric Robinson, whom just a little while ago we lost. He says, and this is from a book called Terms of Order, if in some spiteful play, one were compelled by some demon or God to choose a transgression against Nietzsche so profound and fundamental to his temperament and intention as to break apart the ground on which his philosophy stood, one could do no better than this: a society which has woven into its matrix for the purpose of suspending and neutralizing those forces antithetic to individual autonomy, the constructed reality that all are equally incomplete. Then the principle of incompleteness, the absence of discrete organismic integrity, if it were to occupy in a metaphysics the place of inequality in political philosophy, would bring to human society a paradigm subversive to political authority as the archetypal resolution, as the prescription for order. How can we think about American democracy, the brutality of our improvement, the viciousness of the ways we are put to use, as the praxis of this concern with inequality of the individual, and therefore as the metaphysical foundation of our national political philosophy? More importantly, how can we more intensely feel the physics of our surround, our social aesthetic, the gravity of our love and loss? How can we want the order from which our desire is derived to be drowned in the disorder of all the nothing we have? What would it mean to say we cannot take a position on politics, even the old and honorable "I don't vote because I'm Marxist" position? What if we said we have no options? That here we don't even have the option of no option? We think that would be good. And when I say we, I'm speaking not just for myself, but primarily also for my two fundamental writing partners, Laura Harris and Stefano Harney. And they couldn't be here today, but they sent me. Anyway, we think that would be good. Zoe gets us started. She thinks off of what we want is likely to inhabit not being and not having here.